Ronald Clark O'Brien was born on October 19, 1944. He lived with his wife, Daneen, and two children, Elizabeth and Timothy, in Deer Park, Texas, a suburb outside of Houston. He worked as an optician and also served as a deacon at a Baptist church. While at the church, he also took part in singing in the choir and oversaw the church's bus program. O'Brien appeared to be an upstanding model citizen. One of the pastors who knew O'Brien described him as a good Christian man and an above-average father. The evening of October 31st, 1974, started as any other Halloween night. O'Brien had never really shown any interest in the holiday, but this year he was eager and excited to take his two children out for trick-or-treating. A family friend, Jim Bates, and his two children joined the O'Brien family for the Halloween activities in a Pasadena, Texas neighborhood. The group had approached one house, but no occupant had answered the knocks at the door. The children grew impatient and ran ahead to the next house while O'Brien stayed behind. A few minutes later, O'Brien caught up with the rest of the group and had with him 5 21-inch pixie sticks, a sweet powdered candy in a straw-like tube. He told the group that the occupants of the former house had actually been home and were handing out expensive treats. The group continued with their trick-or-treating, and at the end of the evening, O'Brien gave each of the Bates children a pixie sticks, and then one each to Elizabeth and Timothy. As O'Brien and his children arrived home, he saw a 10-year-old boy he recognized from his church and gave him the 5th pixie sticks. Before bed, O'Brien allowed his children to pick one piece of candy to have. Timothy decided that he wanted the giant pixie sticks. He was having some trouble getting the powder to come out of the tube, so O'Brien helped loosen the powder. As Timothy tasted some of the powder, he told his dad that the candy tasted bitter. O'Brien gave Timothy Kool-Aid to wash away the bitter taste from his mouth. Shortly after, Timothy complained that his stomach hurt and ran to the bathroom and began to vomit and convulse. O'Brien ran to help, and Timothy fell limp in his arms. On the way to the hospital, less than an hour after eating the candy, Timothy had passed away. During an autopsy, the medical examiner noted the scent of almonds coming from Timothy's mouth. This is a classic sign of cyanide poisoning. After further testing, it was confirmed that Timothy had died from ingesting a large amount of potassium cyanide. Police were able to retrieve the other 4 pixie sticks, luckily none had been consumed yet, and found that someone had replaced the top 2 inches of candy powder with granules of cyanide. Upon hearing of Timothy's poisoning death, the community was in a panic. Many parents in the area turned in candy their children collected during trick-or-treating to the police, fearing that they too may contain poison. Police immediately began to question O'Brien and asked for him to walk them through the group's trick-or-treating activity that evening. Initially, O'Brien told the police that he could not remember which house he got the pixie sticks from. Police found this odd, since the group had only gone to homes on 2 streets only as it had been raining. Police visited each of the houses the group had gone to and discovered that none of them had given out pixie sticks. They then brought O'Brien to the neighborhood, and after walking around the area 3 times, O'Brien led them to the house where no one had answered the door that Halloween night. He told police that he had went back to that house before catching up with the rest of the group. He said the owner of the home did not turn on any lights, but did crack the door open and handed him the 5 pixie sticks. He only saw the man's arm and described it as hairy. The police spoke to the owner of the home, a man named Courtney Melvin, and found that he was an air traffic controller at William P. Hobby Airport. Melvin said that he did not get home from work until 11 p.m. on that Halloween night. Melvin was ruled out as a suspect when over 200 people confirmed that Melvin had been at work that night. Police decided to look more into O'Brien's history and discovered shocking information. O'Brien was far from the model citizen appearance he wore. He struggled greatly with holding down a job. Over a 10-year period, he had been employed by 21 different companies and was fired from each one for negligence or fraudulent behavior. In the fall of 1974, at the age of 30, O'Brien was facing being fired again when his employer, Texas State Optical, suspected him of stealing money. At this time, he was only bringing home $150, about $900 in today's currency value, a week, and was barely able to cover food and rent for the family. Later, it was discovered that he was over $100,000 in debt. He had defaulted on numerous bank loans, and his vehicle was on the verge of being repossessed. It was found that in the months preceding that Halloween night, O'Brien had taken out life insurance policies on both of his children. In January 1974, he had taken out $10,000, about $60,000 in today's value, life insurance policies on both of his children. In September 1974, he took out an additional $20,000 policy on both of the children despite the life insurance agency's objections. A few days before October 31st, 1974, O'Brien had taken out yet another $20,000 policy on each of the children. His wife, Daneen, later claimed to police that she had no idea about the life insurance policies taken out on their children. After more digging, the police learned that on the morning after Timothy's death, O'Brien had called his insurance company to ask about collecting the policies he had taken out on his son. They also learned that O'Brien had visited a chemical store in Houston to buy cyanide shortly before that evening, but had left without buying anything as the smallest amount available to purchase was 5 pounds. The police began to suspect that O'Brien had laced the candies with poison in order to kill his children and collect their life insurance policies. They believed that he gave the other children the poisoned candy as a way to cover up his crimes. After repeated questioning, O'Brien maintained his innocence. Despite the fact that police were not able to find when and where O'Brien bought the cyanide, he was arrested for Timothy's murder on November 5, 1974. He was indicted on 1 count of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. O'Brien entered a not guilty plea to all 5 counts. His trial began in Houston on May 5, 1975. A chemist who knew O'Brien testified that in the summer of 1973, O'Brien had contacted him asking about cyanide and how much would be fatal. A chemical supply salesman testified that O'Brien had asked him how to purchase cyanide. Friends and co-workers of O'Brien testified that in the months leading up to Timothy's death, O'Brien had shown an unusual interest in cyanide and would talk about how much it would take to kill a person. O'Brien's sister-in-law and brother-in-law testified that on the day of Timothy's funeral, O'Brien was talking about using the insurance money to take a vacation and buy items. Daneen testified that Timothy did not actually choose the pixie sticks as his candy choice that night. She said that O'Brien had forced Timothy to take the pixie sticks. O'Brien's defense brought in the decades-old urban legend that a mad poisoner would hand out candy laced with poison needles and razor blades. Despite the popularity of this legend, there are actually no documented instances of strangers poisoning Halloween candy. On June 3, 1975, a jury took just 46 minutes to find O'Brien guilty of capital murder and the 4 counts of attempted murder. The jury took 71 minutes to sentence him to death by electrocution. After the conviction, Daneen filed for divorce. She later remarried and her new husband adopted Elizabeth. Due to being sentenced to death under Texas law at the time, O'Brien was confined to the Ellis 1 unit near Huntsville, Texas. A former chaplain who worked at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice said that O'Brien was shunned and despised by his fellow death row inmates for killing his child. The inmates even petitioned to hold a demonstration on his execution date to express their hatred of him. O'Brien's first execution date was set for August 8, 1980. His attorney managed to successfully petition for a stay of execution. A second date was set on May 25, 1982, but was also postponed. The judge on the case scheduled a third date for October 31, 1982, the 8th anniversary of Timothy's murder, and to use, for the first time in Texas, the method of lethal injection. The Supreme Court delayed the date yet again in order to give O'Brien a chance to seek an appeal for a new trial. A fourth date was scheduled for March 31, 1984. O'Brien's attorney sought another stay of execution on the basis that lethal injection was a cruel and unusual punishment, but on March 28th, a federal judge rejected the request. On March 31st, shortly after midnight, O'Brien was executed by lethal injection. His last words were, "What is about to transpire in a few moments is wrong. However, we as human beings do make mistakes and errors. This execution is one of those wrongs, yet doesn't mean our whole system of justice is wrong. Therefore, I would forgive all who have taken part in any way in my death. Also, to anyone I have offended in any way during my 39 years, I pray and ask for your forgiveness, just as I forgive anyone who offended me in any way. And I pray and ask God's forgiveness for all of us, respectively as human beings. To my loved ones, I extend my undying love. To those close to me, know in your hearts I love you one and all. God bless you all, and may God's best blessings be always yours. Ronald C. O'Brien. P.S. During my time here, I have been treated well by all TDC personnel. A crowd of 300 gathered outside the prison during the execution. Some yelled, "Trick or treat," while others showered anti-death penalty demonstrators with candy. Ronald O'Brien is buried in Forest Park East Cemetery in Webster, Texas. Timothy is buried in Forest Park Lawndale Cemetery in Houston, Texas. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more Criminal Connections.